All right. The RPG-based logic animation blueprint. This is adapted from the C++ object that I tried to bring. I've tried to pretty much put the base generic movement logic and speed calculation logic that are called right here into the C++ side, so that way it's not overblown and complicated, and it can stay generalized for any kind of object. Because the main things that you need when using this animation blueprint is you need a pawn source, which should be an AI character of some kind, and it needs to have a class assigned to it. Because if it doesn't, it won't move. If we go in here for the animation blueprint, it won't go from the null to the character check, and then from the character check to the actual idle. And that's because we need to verify that the source pawn exists in general, and we need to verify that within that the class object exists. And that's because everywhere else we're making sure that we're just dynamically loading that animation for that general section from a actual structured blueprint object. And pretty much any of the class already has like, hey, this is the idle sequence, this is the walk sequence, this is what we're using for turning, which I'm not using that anymore because I couldn't get turning to work properly. But moving from idle to the walk blend node, and you set all your blend information here, all your direction and lock-on direction and all that is set within the C++ side based on what's coming from the actual object itself. So that way you can keep your logic for how you want your character to move around based on what rules to one and only one animation blueprint. The issue I came across is the fact that I had so many characters, so many enemies that were all pretty much the same in operation that I ended up just writing the same code over and over and over again for these animation nodes. So I sat down and tried to find a way, C++ wise, that I could bring all of this together to only have to do the logic once. And my solution was to pretty much make an animation blueprint instance and add the ability to get a general object that has a general structure that I can pull the animations from to be able to set in here. And so far, everything is working. It's working with the enemies, the NPCs, as well as both of my heroes. So pretty much I don't have to rewrite any of this ever again. And I can just adapt that class structure to any of my actual actors with whatever customized animations I want them to have to be able to operate in there. Even if their mesh is different, but their bone structures are the same, where they can use the same animations, it just makes the process a lot easier and quicker to be able to apply those animations to other characters. The only thing that you will have to do is when you set up a character and you want the animation blueprint, where is it? Here. You will have to make an animation blueprint, a basic one, reparent that to the RPG basic logic. Make sure that you call the parent, add call parent for the tick, and add in the full body and default slot, I think, is here already, but you have to add in the slot node there in the animations, so that information can be forwarded up to the parent. And with all this, I also added the ability to do states. So that way you can change your move mode and be able to switch between a walking state, sneak state, attack state, state, swimming state, etc. Because I have crawl and mount here as well that I haven't implemented. But all of these states should be able to be programmed once and only once for a different, for a certain logic type. So if you have a bipedal or a quadruped, bipedal is humans, but if you have a quadruped that you need to program the logic for, you can do the same setup, set up everything that will work for a quadruped, for all of its rules that you need for its moving, if it sneaks, if it attacks, or whatever. You can set all that logic up here and then apply it to all of your other quadruped type of characters, as long as you keep the animation structure the same in general. Or if you want to add more animation structures, all you have to do is just go to the base object. So this object is pretty much created in C++, but the only thing it is a variable name with an animation type. So it's either a montage or an animation or a blend space. If you want to expand that, you can go and just copy and paste, rename the variable to whatever you want to, compile, and boom, you can expand it to however you want to. No headaches, no frustrations, none of that. Along with all of this, we have customized animation notifies. If I can find it with all these folders open. Okay. So, again, if you re-enable action battle, this is a notify that states that you're at the end of a combo. And what it will do is reset all the combo variables that you have, and it will clear your input buffer. So that way you can't do any more combos in general. And it'll restart you back from, ground zero for combos. These two are exactly the same as the turn-based ones, so I'm going to explain the turn-based ones in a second. Okay, so we have an animation notify that can hide a mesh. I usually use this when I'm blowing up a character and I can't actually blow up the character. I play an explosion animation and then immediately call this to hide the character mesh. So that way the character vanishes, the object's still there, but it's blowing up, and then it's going to call a destroy me notify shortly after, which is next. This is a self-destruct BP. And this is an animation notify that will come through, make sure that you're an AI enemy, and then call the kill me. And what that would do is say, hey, I'm currently immediately dead. Go award the EXP, the prizes, and everything else that's about me, and report me to whatever system that you need me to report to be able to process that after I'm dead. I have a field action on one of my other characters that he jumps in the ground. He jumps in the air and smashes the ground. And what I added to the end of that animation is the ability to try to detect an ambush. And what this will do is do a check for, a general area at a general radius and say, hey, if there's any enemies within this range, start a battle. So that means I just tried to execute a battle from a special animation or a special move. Within that same animation that I can use to like jump up and smash down, I also have an animation notify in there that will say, hey, detect to see if there's any breakable walls around me. If there are, break them. So, and that's how I do the wall breaking effect for going into the battle area in general. This is the function that you need to call anytime you stagger the enemy. So if you do, when you do an attack on an enemy, if it hits, it will do a stagger. It will call a stagger animation on that character. And the stagger animation montage has to have a call to this stagger. If it does not, then that character will be stuck, and it will not be able to move on in battle. And that's because you were in the middle of a process of doing an attack. You got staggered. Within that stagger, you need to check and say, hey, I was just staggered. If I was in these actual modes, I need to enter the stagger recovery mode that's inside of the AI state machine in the behavior tree, and it's going to go in and determine what it needs to do after it got staggered. Move forward BP is what I use to be able to move the character in any direction, be it backwards, forwards, excuse me, be it backwards, forwards, up or down, within the world. And what this will do is pretty much just move the character. Because of how Persona works, there's different ways of moving the character. Normally you would do a sweep to be able to make sure that the character can move forward with this transition that I'm trying to add to the character. So do a trace to make sure that I can actually move to that location, and then move my character to that location. For some reason, the sweep check does not work in Persona. So I have to turn that off and actually just do an instant move in Persona to be able to see the character move forward. Make sure that you turn the preview off when you're actually playing it in the game, so that way it can move your character forward with a sweep. Otherwise, you'll be able to move through a wall by accident or through a character. Along with that move forward, this is the animation notify that just resets the character in Persona back to the 0-0 mark, so that way at the beginning of the animation it'll move back to where it needs to be, so you can see the animation happen again over and over. Just make sure that once you're done tweaking your animation movements, that you make sure you set this you remove this from the notify list, so it does not reset your character in the actual world. And then for using an item, this is an animation notify that will, after you get the animation, after the animation goes through, that it will actually trigger the current item that you're trying to use for that character and use it on the given target that it's supposed to be used on, be it the enemy or a friendly target. Now, for the turn-based animation notifiers. The next turn-based action is used to determine, is used to say, hey, I'm ready to do my next action in my list. Please let me process this and see what's, next in my list. I don't remember using this, but that's what it's supposed to be used for. I think I normally use this one. Hold on. Sorry. I'm completely like absent-minded right now. All right, so yes, this is what you use at the end of a animation attack to be able to allow the enemy or the player to go to the next attack in the attack list or in the combo list. The turn space cone hit. This will apply a cone hit damage check to wherever you are in the world at whatever configured hit radius and cone degrees that is marked inside the actual animation notify. The line based one just does a square sweep instead of a spear sweep to be able to get the information and call off the information for doing damage. The line spell, I had to make this specifically for launching a projectile. So what this will do is when you trigger this in one of the spells, it's mainly the one that he uses to throw a spell out or throw a fireball out of his hand. It will pretty much get the current action, figure out what the... Let me expand this out. It'll get your current action that you're trying to execute. It will get the particle damage and the particle sound information from it and set that in the actual, attacking section. It will also spawn a projectile. Excuse me. It will spawn a projectile, which is the general damage that I have. And it will spawn it from the actual spell projectile socket straight at the enemy, and the velocity, or should I say the initial velocity, will be based on the direction angle between you and your target, which kind of gets messed up a little bit if your target is right in your face, because the look at rotation may mess up. It may mess up in the calculation of the forward vector, and the forward vector may be so small that the fireball doesn't shoot out, which is why I have a ×3 on the actual vector to make sure that even if it's really, really small, that it's going to be big enough to say, hey, this is your initial velocity direction, so make sure you go in that direction when you launch this fireball. This also sets the projectile to be homing, so for some reason, if the enemy runs out of the way while you're launching on the fireball, it'll wander around the enemy to try to home in on it and hit it. And of course, this is the callback to set the damage information for the projectile. And this is what I use for the flamethrower effect, which is it's technically, like it says here, is a ranged line hit. So I am doing a line hit with a fire particle that's going to do damage over time for every tick that it goes through. So every time it's going to come through here, check to see if anyone's in range, and applies the damage calculation to anyone within that area every tick. And because of that, this is one reason I had to go back and go to the actual skill of this move. And where is it? Breath of Fire. Excuse my puns. I'm very punny. I had to change the actual damage down, since it was a per tick, to be 20% of the natural magic power of the current user. Otherwise, it would just be completely overpowered of a move in general when I used it. I think that's it for all the animation notifiers that you can actually use in the system. Again, the action version of these for like an action battle system, it's pretty much the same. You do a cone hit, and you do after you do the cone hit, you make sure that within the area that you're doing your recovery state, if there's any more actions on your list, you check to see if there are any on your list, and then go process them based on your input stack. If not, then you end combo, and that will end the action combo at hand. I do have a render room. If it loads. I might not have added all the textures back to this room yet. No, I haven't. But the general idea of this room is to use this render pass with this camera. With one of these cameras. It should have some kind of render pass information in here. I can't remember exactly how the render pass works right now. But I do know that when you're either running the engine or when you want to do a screenshot, it will only render the actor that you say to render in the render pass. And I've tried to use that to get game rendered meshes out in general. But I've also used this as a general lighting room with all these different lights set up to be able to set up just general lighting setups to look at my characters and see how they look in the engine with different lighting arrangements. This is just a little confined area that I tried to play around with to just see what I could do with all my everything in general. I can't use words right now. I do believe that's all of the example files and things that I have for the system. I mean, the rest of this is just like assets that I've gotten from miscellaneous places with their resource, their credits information here. So if you wanted to go and find out who made these sounds and you know, give them credit in your game and stuff like that, you can go here. You know, Income Tech is Income Tech in general. The only thing I don't think I covered is the skin materials and eye materials and things like that. These are just materials in general that have named parameters. So if I go over to the NPCs, these are the materials that the NPCs have attached. So depending on however you set up your hair material or whatever, if you have a parameter called hair color and hair color highlights, the character customization can come and change these values within the material itself. Same thing with the eye. It can come through and change the eye color here. For the left eye or right eye, I have those separated out. And right now this example only has a left eye, but if you create another material with right eye and apply it to the right eye, then you can have a left eye and right eye color customization. With the clothing, it will change the clothing color as well as the accent color that you have on your material if it exists anywhere within your model, because I pretty much just scan through the entire all of the references for the materials and check to see if this parameter exists on this material. If so, set it to whatever the character customization setup says that this color should be, or this value should be, depending on what you're setting. Same thing with the skin tone. It'll come through. If you have anything named skin tone in your material, it will change that material color to whatever the skin customization should be for that. I do believe that's all there is. The only other videos I'm probably going to make is, again, how to set up a blank project just with like the default, to get the title screen in, to be able to get it to work, to load the level for an initial level. And then after that, you should be able to go through the demo to see how all the objects work, how I assign events to event characters, like I went over earlier, and in general. I got a Christmas tree to put up, so that's probably it for the day. Have a good day. Happy Thanksgiving.